Hi everyone, thank you for tuning in and welcome to part 2 of this lecture series. So, the first term that I want to talk about within the section of elevation and ridges is a cusp. And a cusp is very easy to define. Basically, it's a transition from one thing to another, a point of transition between different states. So, for example, if I have here like a line, the cusp would be here. If I have such a line, it would have more cusps. So all of these things here will be different cusps because the line transitions from one place to another. For example, if you have something like this and it mutates or transitions to something like this, the state in between, which would be shreg in this case, would be a cusp. Okay, so let's say here's a tooth and we have mesial side here and a distal side here. This would be the facial or buccal or whatever, and this will be the oral, lingual, or palatal side. You can see the cusps as apex or pyramidal elevation or a peak located on the occlusal surface of molars. Now, I still haven't drawn them here. They would be somewhere around here. So here it would be a one cusp, and yeah, you cannot see it quite well on the oral side, but it would be somewhere right here, because remember, it's a peak that goes up and then it comes down. Now, as I said, within the dental world is like a pyramid, like a four-sided pyramid. Not exactly this type. On this picture, you can see them here, 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 and here, but they don't exactly look like a pyramid. What I mean with a pyramid is the following. If you can imagine the linguo-occlusal edge here drawn in red on the tooth as sort of a divider from one surface to another, then additionally you need to imagine this area right here where sort of the highest elevation of the sides is. Then you can divide the cusp or the area into 4 quarters and looks like a pyramid, but you really need to have big imagination to imagine something like this. One more thing that I wanted to additionally say is that depending on how many cusps a tooth has, it's divided in 1 cusp, 2 cusp premolar, 4 cusp molar, 5 cusps, depending if the morphology has changed, and it can vary. It can even have 6 cusps, or you can even find 6 cusps on a tooth. As I said, if the cusp is here, then you will have 4 lines of the pyramid. This would be 1, 2, 3, 4 lines. These lines are usually referred to as ridges. So this would be an occlusal ridge of a cusp. This here would be, if this side was the mesial, would be the mesial ridge of the cusp. This here would be the distal ridge of the cusp, and this would be the occlusal ridge of a cusp. And if we have one more cusp here, and this would be the oral side, it's very easy. It's self-explanatory. So one would be occlusal ridge of a cusp, then you have occlusal ridge of an oral cusp, and you get the idea. When you view a tooth from facial or oral position, you see cusp, it usually divides the tooth into 2 halves. So if this was the distal side and this would be the mesial side, it divides the tooth in 2 halves. So mesial and distal. In fact, when we go deeper in how the cusps divide surfaces, the rabbit hole goes much deeper. Basically here we see a facial surface or buccal surface of a molar. This would be the mesial side. This would be the distal side. Here there are 2 cusps where the X is marked. On these cusps you have a ridge that moves downwards on the buccal surface. Now these ridges basically divide the buccal surface in 4 areas. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this area right here, or let me just get another color. So this area right here would be the distal area of a mesiobuccal cusp. I mean, yeah, if you want to go dive deeper into these things, the rabbit hole doesn't have an end. When you look at anterior teeth, such as the canine in this picture, on the lingual side, so this would be the lingual side, since there's not occlusal surface, you can see sort of how it converges towards lingually. When this conversion happens, it happens to these two edges, and this area right here is called cingulum. So this here is cingulum. No, it's not this cingulum. As I said before, the cusps of the tooth are pyramidal shape out of 4 sides, and it's divided by ridge. However, some other things can also be viewed as a ridge. For example, here I've made a dotted line, and this can be oral or facial ridge of the occlusal surface of this tooth. So for example, this occlusal view that you have here on the crown has sort of 4 ridges that outline the occlusal surface. This would be the facial ridge, this would be the oral ridge, and if this side is mesial, this would be the mesial ridge, and then this is the distal side, and this would be the distal ridge. Furthermore, when you view a tooth mesiodistally, then you see the mesial or distal ridge of the occlusal surface. Here I made it with a straight line. Everything else is sort of a dotted line or double line, whereas the ridge that I'm talking about is a full line. And you can see it has sort of a triangular shape, and the angles are here marked on the picture. And this type of ridges are called triangular ridges. Now there's one more ridge that I want to talk about, and it's called a transverse ridge. And a transverse ridge would be basically a ridge that crosses the occlusal surface in more or less in buccolingual direction. So that would be the occlusal ridge of the facial cusp and the occlusal ridge of the oral cusp of this tooth. And in that midline where they meet, that is called a transverse ridge. Now I talked about transversal ridge, and basically there's this ridge, as I said, goes in facial-lingual direction, so that would be this here. But there's one more type of ridge in the occlusal surface, and it's called oblique ridge. And basically oblique ridge is very easy to remember. It's the same transversal ridge, it just doesn't go in a straight buccolingual direction, it just goes within a transversal direction. So sort of like this one right here, this would be an oblique ridge. Basically what this means is now we can do a lot of things together. We can sort of find a lot of things on this tooth. So this would be the facial cusp, whereas this would be the lingual cusp or the palatal cusp of the premolar. Here, this side, this would be the distal marginal ridge, and here there would be the mesial marginal ridge. This part right here would be the mesial cusp ridge of the buccal cusp, and this would be like the distal cusp ridge of the buccal cusp, considering that this side is mesial and this side is distal. And again, on the palatal cusp, this would be the distal cusp ridge of the palatal cusp, and this would be the mesial cusp ridge of the palatal cusp. Now, very briefly, I'm gonna explain 2 terms that explain the depressions and grooves within the tooth anatomy, and after those 2 you can follow any dental anatomy, or you can learn any dental anatomy of a specific tooth. Basically, a sulcus is a term that explains a V-shaped depression that runs mesiodistally within a tooth. So if this is the mesial side and this is the distal, here in the center, in red in the picture, the sulcus. right here. And a sulcus can have many different shapes, but the most important thing is this central groove. Basically, it's where two ridges meet, or two cusp ridges meet, and the most important within every occlusal surface of the tooth is the central sulcus that usually has some form of a straight line, and then all the other additional sulci just add up to it. So if I just made a circle here, it doesn't look much like a tooth, but it can be like the 6. Now the last term that I want to talk about today is a fossa, and fossa in plural, and it's a small hollow depression. So here on the picture, this right here would be the lingual fossa. Now it's exaggerated on this tooth. This is not how the anatomy of the central incisor looks like, or it doesn't correspond quite anatomy of the central incisor, but it's basically a hollow depression between the marginal ridges. So these are the marginal ridges of the lingual or the palatal side of the incisor, and here in the middle there's fossa, and usually the pits occur where 2 or more grooves join within the fossa. That's all about the terminology now, part 2 video, and I think that if you take your time and learn the terminology that I talked about, you can follow the other videos that I will make.